Republicans to reject a bipartisan immigration and Ukraine aid bill to try to gain an advantage in the November election. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, who did support the deal, conceded that it will not become law. That's a quote, citing House Speaker Mike Johnson's opposition. Greg Vallier is with AGF Investments.
The new Speaker of the House, who's a rookie, Mike Johnson, is trying to assert himself, and it's not easy. The bigger story, in my opinion, 8 or 9 months before the election, Trump is calling the shots. You've got a weakened Senate majority leader in Mitch McConnell, and you've got Mike Johnson, and neither of them are capable of getting a deal, so Trump is in the picture.
Greg Vallier with AGF Investments. Presidential hopeful Nikki Haley, meanwhile, suffered an embarrassing loss in the largely symbolic Republican Nevada presidential primary, coming in a distant second to an option labeled none of these candidates. On the Democratic side, President Biden won an easy victory in Nevada's Democratic primary. Secretary of State Antony Blinken set to meet Israeli leaders today as Hamas put forward a detailed plan for a new ceasefire and hostage release deal. But both sides are dug in. Bloomberg's Ethan Bronner explains if the two sides are even close to a deal.
I would say they're not close at all. I mean, they're alive. The negotiations exist. But when the Hamas response came late last night here, the Israeli response was, well, this is close to a no from our perspective, but not so close that it's an actual no, so we could keep talking.
Bloomberg's Ethan Bronner. Secretary of State Blinken is on his 5th visit to the region since the war broke out as he tries to advance the ceasefire talks while pushing for a larger post-war settlement. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg. Paul and Alex.
All right, Amy Morris, thank you so much. We appreciate that. After the close, we have earnings from the Walt Disney Company. And we were talking to Geetha Ranganathan earlier today on surveillance and on, I guess we do it on this show too?
We're going to do it on this show too, in the next hour.
She was saying that the street's really focused on the streaming business and most importantly, when they're going to start making money on the streaming business. Now, they say, I guess on their last quarter, that they would break even in the fourth quarter of 2024, but hey, it's going to be a little bumpy after that, and who knows? So that's a big issue because these media companies like Disney, like NBC and Paramount, they've been losing a lot of money in the streaming business, and the street's had enough of it.
But I've also been reading that it's not linear. I mean, that like making profits in streaming right now will not be linear.
Well,
as in like you're not going to get better and better and better. It's going to be real lumpy.
And it shouldn't be because you have a fixed cost, which is programming, and it's just a question of how many subscribers you get. And once you get enough subscriber revenue to cover your programming, that should be consistent profitability going forward. That's what we saw from Netflix, and that's why people aren't buying this argument from a lot of these media companies, which is, hey, we know what your costs are, and you've told us what your programming is going to be. So all I had to do is add, multiply subscribers times the revenue per month, and I kind of get my revenue, and I can model that out. And we've seen it from Netflix. They would launch their service in a particular country, and it would be a couple of years to break even, 2 to 3 years depending upon the country, and then it was pretty much profit after that. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how they position this whole thing.
What do you think that is? Like, do you think that the costs just still are not under control, or do you think that they just are not squeezing enough out of each subscriber?
I think it's very competitive out there, and I think the churn to their revenue is probably much higher than they would like because maybe I'll subscribe for 6 months and then I'm not really a baseball fan, so I'll cut it or something like that. I'm really just doing it for some football, whatever. And so I think the churn to the revenue makes the revenue probably a little bit less predictable, and I think they're finding their churn is a little bit higher than maybe what Netflix charges and the churn that they have there. So we'll see. But then we had this morning the announcement of this new sports streaming service. So I'm sure every question today from analysts will be, what's this new sports thing?
Look at that, though. Isn't that interesting timing?
Yes.
So it comes out the day before earnings that you're going to have this venture that everyone's going to talk about rather than something else in particular?
And basically, if you're Fox and Warner Brothers Discovery, you're letting Disney be the spokesperson for this whole new business, because let's face it, ESPN is the most valuable asset being contributed to this new service. So we'll have to see. So all I know is, do I still stream my stuff on ESPN or do I have to subscribe to something new? I have no idea.
That's the point. Who knows?
Who knows what's going on out there? But we'll figure it out. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney.
The real outperformance has been in U.S. corporate high yield.
Are the companies lean enough? Have they trimmed all the fat?
The semiconductor business is a really cyclical business.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Do investors like the M&A that we've seen?
These are two big-time blue-chip companies.
The window between the peak and cut changing super fast.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, coming up in this hour, another blue-chip CEO discussion. This time, Dara Khosrowshahi, Uber CEO. He's going to sit down with Bloomberg's Emily Chang, Ed Ludlow, and Caroline Hyde. We've got him outnumbered 3-1. That'll be just a few moments. Get the update on Uber and the ride-hailing business. And we talked about Geetha Ranganathan. Yeah, we're going to have her this hour as well. She's at Bloomberg Intelligence on the media business, previewing some Disney earnings and what this new sports streaming service is. Do I have to subscribe to something new? And when am I going to actually pay for it if I do decide to do it? She's going to give us all the details. First, we're going to kick it off with Mr. John Tucker and a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, and this Business Flash is being brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with the solutions they need to grow a thriving business. Commonwealth, go where you grow. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Right now, 5,000 in sight for the S&P 500. There's also a Treasury auction today, the 10-year notes. Nothing to yawn about, because if it goes well and there's solid demand, that could be a bullish catalyst for both the equity and the bond market as well. Also on Wall Street's radar, a raft of central bank speakers. Meantime, Kathy Bostjancic at Nationwide sees a Fed rate cut now being pushed to May or June.
We're actually seeing some signs of a reacceleration in economic activity. So we need more data. I guess we're in the same camp as the Federal Reserve. We need to see more data before we can decide, when exactly they're likely to cut rates and by how much. I think that matters as well.
And right now in the S&P 500, Enphase Energy, 17% higher. That in terms of index points, the leader right now for the index. A Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis President Neil Kashkari speaking to CNBC, saying officials would like to see a few more months of inflation data before cutting interest rates. S&P 500, 29 points higher, up 0.6%, right now at 4984. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 147 points, and the NASDAQ 100, 153 points higher. That's up 0.9%. And we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Alex and Paul, so they're trying to stump me. They both turn their lights on.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's our sole
We're
goal
onto
to mess with you.
your system. John Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Alex Steele, Paul Sweeney, we're live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. We're also streaming this video thing live to YouTube. So go over to youtube.com, search Bloomberg Radio, search Bloomberg Podcast. Anyway, that'll get you where you need to go. We're also in your dashboard with Bloomberg, with Apple CarPlay, the Bloomberg Business app, all there. Very easy at the touch of a button. Much safer, as Tom Keene points out, to just kind of searching around on your radio dial. Right now, we got, as John Tucker was just reporting, we've got the markets a little bit higher here. Let's see what's happening underneath the hood here for these equity markets with Nora Melinda. She covers that for Bloomberg News. Nora, what are you looking at?
So we've been looking at New York Community Bancorp all day. That's ticker NYCB. Those shares are plunging as much as 14%, the lowest since 1997. This all comes after earlier this morning, we heard that Moody's cut its credit rating to junk, while some analysts are saying that the bank's update on deposits should quell concerns and stabilize the stock. But the bank has really fallen about 60% over the last 5 sessions, and we did see a headline cross a little bit earlier saying that the bank is in talks to offload mortgage risks and plans to sell RV loans. It's exploring the sale of roughly about $1 billion in portfolio of RV and marine loans.
And here's the interesting thing is that you talk to some distressed debt investors like 6, 8, 9 months ago, they were like buying some of these loans from banks that were really going under, right? Or that were really struggling. And at some point, larger banks had to sell some of their book too. And you have to wonder, are they stepping in now or will they?
Yep.
Will the bid ask come in aggressively because of the pressure on the share price? I just wonder how that's going to play out.
Yeah, interesting. And we were talking to Herman Chan just in the last segment, and is there a spot here for the government? Is there a spot where the government steps in and tries to do something here, or even makes that phone call to some of the bigger banks saying, hey, do you want to take a look at this regional bank?
Yeah.
So anyway, John Tucker was just asking the question, what's the stock price that gets people really nervous? And I don't know, I feel kind of nervous down here if I were a shareholder and a
But
bondholder.
deposits weren't leaving.
That's
so
right.
clearly, I mean, that's a very different story than like an SVB sort of scenario. Whether or not they have the capital or can raise the capital to keep afloat is different, but people are not as of yet. There's no run on that bank from that perspective. All right, let's go to Enphase.
Yes, this is the biggest gainer in the S&P 500 right now, climbing as much as 23%, just shy of its biggest gain in 2 years. We were talking about this a bit earlier. The company predicted a potential bottom for the industry in the current quarter. The CEO said that Europe is already showing early signs of recovery, and he expects the non-California states to bounce back quickly. Alex, I know you have your little disclosure and your ties to this situation. I mean, but
I just hung out at my friend's pool that was paid for by Enphase stock. Like, I didn't do anything, but the pool's real nice.
Nice.
I had to see it.
Heated, really good. And then wrapping up, Chipotle. They did really well, right?
Yes, I mean, we're
Paul's so happy. He loves
going
him
today.
Chipotle.
I was going to ask.
Wednesday is my Chipotle day.
Okay. What's your order?
3 hard tacos, chicken, onions, and we'll do some pico de gallo.
Okay.
And
More
cheese.
importantly, what's our order?
Yes.
No
Where are you
thanks,
getting
no
us?
Thanks, no thanks.
No burrito supreme?
No, I do not like Chipotle.
What's
I
your
just don't
place of
get that.
choice?
What's my what?
What's your place of choice?
Fast food wise.
Oh, I don't eat fast food.
Okay, well,
Don't eat fast food?
No. Are you
I guess
nuts?
we're alone in this.
That's just
how?
un-American.
I can't digest that.
Well, investors are cheering Chipotle on. The shares are rising as much as 9.2%. That's the highest intraday since the company's IPO back in 2006. The burrito chain reported fourth quarter earnings, fourth quarter comparable sales growth that surpassed consensus estimates. And we had a Citi analyst raising up the price target on the stock to a Wall Street high following the print, noting that the company is not being hit by consumer belt tightening. A lot of its peers have been experiencing that, but it seems as though people's bellies are open and they're ready for some Chipotle.
Oh, there you go. Chipotle, CMG is the ticker for your Bloomberg terminal. It's got a market cap here. I mean, it's a big company. It's got a market cap that's like $75 billion. Stock's up 7.5% today. 52-week high today, up 17% year to date, and up 55% over the trailing 12 months. I'm looking at the kind of the 1 year performance of, you know, like the Shake Shacks and some of the other Domino's, Potbelly, some of the peers. They're all performing well, those stocks.
Also, wasn't there an avocado shortage? That's over, right? Because that was the whole thing.
Well, I'm not
you
an
had to pay
avocado
up.
guy.
You don't get guac on your
No, I'm not a
tacos?
guac guy. No, I know. I'm just not a guac guy. And I lived in California where the guac capital of the world. I mean, the avocado capital.
Where all the
of the
trucks
world.
from Mexico would be shipped in with all the avocados.
Right,
exactly.
Yeah, but I think that probably helped. I don't know whether their margin might have been helpful also. Which interesting because there was California legislation, right, increasing the minimum wage for fast food workers.
Yeah,
so definitely watching that.
right.
Yeah, in California.
Yep.
So watching that margin, very important as well. All right, Nor, thanks a lot. Nor Melinda joining us on everything market related. Also,
So are you? So no fast food.
No.
What do you do at lunch?
I eat ground peanut butter and a banana with a little bit of local honey, and then maybe some veggies and hummus.
John, what do we do here, John?
She's beyond hope.
You
Yes,
get some
yeah.
protein, you get some veggies, and then I have a
I
juice.
think it's a generational thing, John.
And I juice vegetables, and I juice berries, and I put them together, and I drink that.
All right. All right, let's switch gears quickly to Uber Technologies because they reported numbers here. We have the CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi. He is the CEO of Uber. He's speaking in just moments of Bloomberg's Emily Chang, Ed Ludlow, Caroline Hyde. Talking about the quarter here, the stock is trading higher here today. So good news coming out of Uber, and the stock's done pretty darn well over the recent past. It has really separated itself from Lyft. So let's go to that conversation with the CEO of Uber.
Welcome to our Bloomberg television and radio audiences worldwide. Uber out with the results reporting gross bookings that beat estimates, showing strong global demand for rides and food delivery during the holiday period. Joining us now, Bloomberg's Emily Chang and Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi for more on the strong numbers. Em, take it away.
Ed, thank you. Dara, thank you as always for joining us. Look, it was a beat across the board, but the stock is down this morning. You know, now that times are good, we saw trip growth really accelerated. Will that keep up, and how?
Well, our trip growth was super strong, right? We grew trips 24% on a year-on-year basis on a base of 2.6 billion trips. So, you know, as you get larger, it gets tougher to have that kind of growth. But if you look at our gross bookings guidance going forward, it's between 18 and 23%. So we do expect to continue to grow at very, very strong rates. while at the same time continuing to increase profitability and margins, which is the best of both worlds, which is what investors expect of us. And frankly, it's what we know Uber can deliver.
Well, shares just turned positive, so investors are liking what you're saying. Let's talk about the other half of the business, and that is delivery. You had to raise some fees in some markets. You added multi-store ordering. What more can you do in delivery to keep this up?
Well, there's a ton going on in delivery. There's obviously the core online food delivery business. Overall delivery grew 17% on a year-on-year basis, and it's actually accelerating, Emily, right? So it's accelerating versus Q2 versus Q3, and it is about getting the basics right. The first thing is customers want choice. We now have almost 1 million restaurants on our site on a global basis, up about 10%, but they also want reliability. So when we measure the number of orders that we get wrong, the number of orders we get wrong are down 25% on a year-on-year basis. So the business is reliable. You get what you expect as well. And what that's resulting in is our audience is growing, frequency is growing as well. And then as eaters order more and more in a basket, actually basket size is growing. So the growth that we see in Eats is very, very broad. We're adding to it grocery, which is a segment that we're very excited about. You know, the grocery business is actually bigger than the online food business, than the food business in terms of total size. Our grocery business is still pretty young. It's about $7 billion now run rate, growing over 40%, and we're very excited to introduce the grocery experience to all of our eaters out there.
Caroline just pointed out your stock just hit a new record high. I gotta talk about the Super Bowl commercials. I'm obsessed. You've got Ross and Rachel. You've got the Beckhams. These big stars cost money, though, and you had a lot of celebrities last year, too. So is this marketing spend paying off, and are you sure? Because next year I'm expecting Taylor Swift.
Well, you see it by the results. You know, these big stars, they cost a lot, but they deliver a lot, right? And who's better than the Beckhams and Jennifer Aniston as well? You know, the amazing thing about these stars is, you know, they're not afraid of making a little fun of themselves and having a sense of humor, but they also use their own social platforms to amplify the message out there. So it's not just about the commercial. It's about people talking about the commercials. It's about the stars using their Instagram accounts to amplify the platform, et cetera. That's why it's working out for us. And we think it's worth the investment and then more.
And Dara, many times these are global celebrities. You
Yes.
in a global company, even if the Super Bowl is a little bit more US focused, how much are you seeing growth, particularly Latin America, Asia stand out? Are there any areas that you're worried about?
Well, right now, fortunately, we're seeing growth across the globe. For us in mobility, Latin America and Asia Pacific have really been standouts. The LATAM business is growing. The base business is growing. But now in LATAM, what you're seeing is more two-wheelers, actually. It's a product we call Uber Moto. It's lower cost and much more affordable. And so if you want a low-cost ride in Brazil or Mexico, we're seeing more and more users take two-wheelers. And in Asia, we're very, very excited about the India market. The India market has been one that has always held a lot of promise, but we're seeing that promise come to fruition now. There, it's not just four-wheelers, but it's three-wheelers. And the growth rates that we're seeing in India are substantial. And we think that, you know, that business can continue to grow over the next 5 to 10 years. So there's a lot of growth and excitement ahead in many of the markets out there.
A global conversation with our global TV and radio audience. We are, of course, speaking with Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi. And Dara, I hate to be the Debbie Downer that focuses on the one area of perhaps lackluster performance, but freight, tell us a little bit about it. It was in line with where the market wanted to see it, but it is still a bit of a drag. When do you see the turnaround?
Well, the freight business is a cyclical business. And what we are seeing is at least a stabilization of the overall freight industry. There was too much supply out there. Demand wasn't growing. We're seeing a stabilization in rates. We're seeing spot rates improve as well. So I think that's an early signal that the freight marketplace is going to improve. And what's really cool about Uber Freight is that we are using our marketplace technology, matching, pricing, et cetera, and bringing it to the freight industry. So we're very confident that a turn is coming. We don't know when, but we're definitely seeing signal of that turn. And we can bring our technology prowess and the service levels that other players who are just offline really, we believe, can't match. So we're quite optimistic about freight, but it's a little bit of a waiting game to see that cycle turn. And we're hoping to see that cycle turn this year.
Dara, good morning. I think we kind of learned a lot about Uber, the technology company, in the quarter just gone. New products and just more diverse offering on mobility. But there are lots of questions about, well, what is the new product pipeline going forward? You know, how can you keep adding functionality to the platform that is new, opens new addressable markets? Car rental's interesting, right? Because that's an industry that's suffering some pain, yeah.
Well, I think it's car rentals is one area that we're pretty excited about. And what we try to do with Uber is we don't want to just build the same thing that others have built, but let's say a little bit better. We really try to reinvent how you think about a particular product. So one product that we're pretty excited about with car rentals is actually what we call Uber Valet. And with this product, you know, you push a button, you get to pick your car, but then an Uber driver will come and drop off that car for you in front of your house or wherever you want that car dropped off. So we want to bring that little Uber delight in whatever experiences that we build so that we're heads and shoulders above our competition, so to speak. Now, we do it in partnership with car rental companies, so it's good business for them, but it's the magic of Uber that we want to introduce in every single innovation out there, and we think there's plenty of innovation ahead for us.
Yeah, I'm somebody that takes rideshare. There are other rideshare platforms available to work every morning, but there seems to be some evidence that corporate ridership's coming back. Where do you see that most?
Yeah, corporate has actually been a great signal for us early this year. Last year, if you looked at corporate, and we have a very significant corporate presence in what we call Uber for Business, and it allows companies, instead of, you know, black cars, et cetera, they can use Uber. It's connected into the corporate expense systems, et cetera. There's an area of safety, which is, you know, exactly where your employees are. So it's been a very, very popular offering for us. And last year, you know, as corporates were more careful in terms of their spending, travel, et cetera, the spending with U4B was muted. We are now seeing, especially in Q4 and so far in the first quarter, companies are starting to lean in again. They're starting to invest. They're getting their employees out to go out and meet customers face to face. And that absolutely is helping our U4B business. That's starting to accelerate. It's high margin business. Usually with U4B, you know, you take a comfort car or a black car. So it's high margin business as well. And we're very, very happy with the signal that we're seeing. And that signal is pretty broad. It's not just a US phenomenon. We're seeing companies around the globe starting to invest again, which we think is a great sign.
I want to talk about EVs because there's, you know, reports consumer demand is falling. You're seeing big automakers pulling back. Your own rental partner, Hertz, also pulling back. How much is this hurting your partnership, your push to zero emissions, and everything you're doing to try to incentivize drivers to switch over?
Well, Emily, we're continuing to push on the EV space. No one said this was going to be easy. And listen, with every technology, there's this initial excitement and everyone gets on board, and maybe people overestimate the potential of a business or how it is going to be. You know, we've been around at Uber for a while, and we actually love solving tough problems. So we continue to lean in with EVs. We now have over 120,000 drivers driving EVs all over the world. Over the past years, we completed more than 300 million trips in terms of EVs. So we continue to lean in. I think a real concern is with charging infrastructure and making sure that charging infrastructure is available and ready, especially where our drivers need it. May not be in the center of the city, but it may be in the towns that they live, et cetera. So if the charging infrastructure comes in, we think we have the partnerships in place. We're putting real money, $900 million behind our push to EVs, including subsidizing rides, so drivers actually make more on an EV trip. So we're determined, and we think we're going to keep pushing the momentum in this space.
You're shutting down Drizzly. You're laying off 150 people. What happened there? Did alcohol sales just decline post-pandemic? Don't you know there's a Super Bowl coming up?
So it's, listen, it was a tough decision there. And what we have observed is that the Uber Eats platform, we talk about the power of the platform, which is, you ride on Uber, you eat on Uber, you get groceries on Uber, you order your alcohol on Uber Eats. The power of that platform is really significant. And, things have changed where companies have to be more disciplined in their investments. And when we look at a marketing investment, should we put the next marketing dollar behind Uber Eats, i.e. a Super Bowl commercial, or should we put that next marketing dollar to introduce the Drizzly brand to consumers? It didn't make sense to keep investing in Drizzly. So we've taken a lot of what we've learned from Drizzly, many of the merchant relationships, et cetera. But essentially that business is shutting down in terms of that organic Drizzly business. And we are building on alcohol within Uber Eats. We think that's the next best investment going forward for us as a company.
Cost discipline. Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi, a joy to have you on the show. Thank you. And of course, our thanks to you, Emily Chang.
All right, that was Dara Khosrowshahi, Uber CEO, speaking with Bloomberg's Emily Chang, Ed Ludlow, and Caroline Hyde. Very positive, remain very positive on the business. And when I think about the ride-sharing business, I mean, again, just going back to Uber, $146 billion market cap, stock's up 1% today, up 15% year to date, but it's doubled over the past year. Lyft is like not even in the conversation anymore. It's just Uber has taken over that space. Has, yeah. I mean, it's just amazing. When they came public, I kind of thought, they're kind of the same thing. I don't know. I'll just pick one or the other. But no, Uber's just taken off, whereas Lyft has really been left behind.
And they have that broadening portfolio that probably really winds up helping them. But you're right. It doesn't feel like there should be one. It feels like there should be room for many of these guys. But it just really has cornered that market to some extent. Yeah. So again, $160 billion market cap for Uber. $5 billion for Lyft. There you go. All right, let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash here with Mr. John Tucker. Here we go.
All right, S&P 500 flirting with 5,000. Currently on track for another record close, even if it does not hit that mark today. The betting is that a solid economy is going to continue fueling corporate earnings at this point. And then you also have that auction, the 10-year yield right now ahead of that, 4.09%. This auction is a record $42 billion of government debt. So if it proves successful, it could be another catalyst that would push bond prices and stock prices also higher. S&P 500 up 30 points. That's a rise of 0.6%. 49.85 on the index right now. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 138 points. That's up 0.4%. The NASDAQ 100, 0.9% higher. That is up 159 points right now. And we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Alex!
Woo! I won. I was really excited because we're going to talk Disney. So I'm like, you're going to know all the stuff, so you guys can just go, and I will just kick it off. Disney reporting after the closing bell today. Of course, yesterday we got the news that ESPN, Fox, and Warner Brothers were going to do a streaming sports service. I don't truly understand what that means, but luckily, Geetha Ranganathan is here with us, Bloomberg Intelligence Analyst on U.S. Media. Geetha, is everyone going to ignore the quarter now and just focus on this ESPN thing?
Yeah, definitely big news, Alex. Absolutely. I think there are a lot of, obviously it raised more questions than answers, but potentially could be a huge game changer. I mean, especially if it kind of comes out at a really attractive price point.
So, Geetha, why are they doing it now, do you think? I mean, what's kind of the strategy there? Are they trying to get people who just don't watch sports, who don't have subscribed to cable? What's the play here?
Yeah, I think, definitely we know that we've lost about 30 million consumers to cord cutting. It used to be 100 million. We're now down to 70 million. We also have multiple folks who have actually never subscribed to a pay TV bundle. And a lot of them actually tend to be very hardcore sports enthusiasts. So the companies are actually pinning that market at about 60 million subscribers, potential subscribers. So there's obviously a huge target market for them. And I think this is really a way, Paul, for these these companies to kind of finally take control of their own destinies in a way, right? They own content production, but they have never, owned distribution. They've always kind of been at the mercy of the pay TV distributor. And so this is a way for them kind of, I think, whatever you want to call it, but in a way kind of future-proofing their revenue streams.
So when you say an attractive price, what is that price?
So there have been some rumors out there. So we know an attractive price has to be something way below the $70 pay TV package, right? That's what we're paying right now if you just want to buy this package off of Comcast or Charter or any of the pay TV operators out there. It's obviously not going to be as low as, say, a regular streaming service, right? Like Netflix for $20. It's obviously going to have to be higher than that. We have seen some reports trickle in about a potential $40 to $50 price point. I would say that is still pretty attractive for a hardcore sports fan. Of course, some others will argue that you're still not going to get all of the sports, right? You're not having Paramount, you're not having, NBC content. So it's still going to be somewhat of an incomplete package. So it remains to be seen, the devil obviously is in the details. We'll have to wait and watch and see if, they're going to be able to license out any of the other sports or how it exactly works. But I would say, at first glance, the $40 price point seems pretty attractive.
Well, I got to pay for that somehow. And I think the way I'm going to pay for it, Keith, is I'm going to call up Comcast and cancel my video package and just keep broadband. The cable companies can't be very happy about this.
No way. I mean, this is really, I think, and if you just kind of look at the market reaction today, you look at the broadcasters, you look at some of these other media companies, obviously a very negative reaction. And I think a lot of that is kind of exactly this point that you're bringing up, Paul, which is this worry that this is actually going to accelerate cord cutting. So we already know that cord cutting is running at about, it used to be back in the day, it used to be 2%, 3%, just the kind of this little trickle. So nobody was really overly concerned about it. Of course, now that has accelerated to about 8.5% right now. And I think this news obviously can take it well into the double digits. And that's really a dismally bleak future for all of these broadcasters.
Do you think that the broadcasters are surprised by this? I mean, they had to have seen something like this coming, right? Like, what's their plan A, B, C, D?
Yeah, I think we kind of knew that ESPN was going to do it, but just kind of getting this more robust bundle, having, both, like, if you kind of think about it, Fox has never ever said, in fact, they've been always kind of married to the pay TV bundle. So having them kind of do something like this obviously is a little bit of a shock, I would say, in some ways. Similarly, Warner Brothers Discovery, again, they don't have too much of sports, but they do have some sports that really count, which is the NBA and March Madness. And so, again, having them kind of participate and make this kind of this bigger streaming service, I think definitely came as a little bit of a surprise, if not as kind of a blindsiding some of these broadcasters.
All right, so I'm guessing on the conference call this afternoon, after the market closed when Disney reports earnings, this will be a topic of conversation. But there's a long list of issues for Disney and investors. What's topic number one for you, aside from what's going on here with the sports business?
And I think the two things that everybody is kind of really looking to is, what the streaming profitability numbers are going to look like. Disney has obviously already done a really, really good job, Paul, in terms of bearing those streaming losses. So just 2 years ago, they were losing about $4 billion a year. Last year, they kind of really cut that down to about $2.5 billion. This year, hopefully, they get it down even lower. They're supposed to turn break even to slightly positive by the end of the fourth quarter, but any kind of guidance that they can offer on that front, I think, is something that investors are going to be looking very, very closely at. And then I think in general, just the cost-cutting efforts, right? We've seen Disney already do a fantastic job. I think in many ways, even the sports streaming service kind of speaks to that whole concept of, rationalization of sports costs, because when they kind of bid in the future for sports rights, the joint venture kind of really helps them limit the downside, I think, in many ways, because sports makes up 40% of Disney's total content bill. So it's a huge part for them. So I think anything on those two fronts, cost cutting and streaming profitability, will be top of mind.
So let's go to the streaming profitability for a second. What is less bad versus good?
So right now, less bad is good, because nobody's making profits right now, other than, of course, Netflix, which just threw out about $7 billion of EBITDA, $7 billion of cash flow. None of these other big media companies are doing it. And so that is kind of, the guiding light, if you will. I mean, everybody wants to be Netflix. Of course, it's not easy to get there. There's going to be a lot of challenges down the road. But I think that, we do have one streamer that has kind of achieved profitability. We do have Netflix at 20% operating margins. It's going to take a long time for Disney, for a lot of these other peers to kind of get anywhere close to Netflix, but I think they know what they have to achieve if they've got to win over the street.
Does Bob Iger have a successor yet? Because that's still kind of an issue.
No, I mean, maybe they do. I'm not really sure. I mean, the one thing that I think was kind of a little bit surprising is their hiring of an external CFO. So we've always kind of seen Disney go internal for a lot of these key management hires. It was interesting that they kind of have Mr. Johnston there in the CFO post. I think obviously he's going to do extremely well, but I think that again raises the question of whether they will kind of look externally for a candidate to lead Disney.
Is Disney stock a value trap at this point? She keeps laughing at us. I don't know what that means.
I wish I knew the answers. I mean, if you just kind of look at the profit profile of this company, it's actually really, really strong. I mean, when I think about the EPS potential, I mean, it's 10 to 15% EPS growth over the next few years, especially if it gets to streaming profitability pretty quickly. So in that situation, I think, the stock will definitely have to re-rate. So, I mean, it all kind of now boils down to what they're going to say on the profitability numbers, what they're going to say on this new streaming service, whether that is going to accelerate the whole profit profile. So, the devil again is going to be in those details.
All right, Geetha, you're going to be busy this afternoon. I think a lot of people are going to be listening into this call to figure out how they're going to get their sports going forward. Who cares about the EPS? But what do I have to buy? What do I have to pay to get all my sports here? So we'll be paying attention to that. Geetha Ranganathan, she covers all of the media stuff for Bloomberg Intelligence based down in Princeton, New Jersey. So all I know is I'm not going to pay an incremental $40 for stuff I already get. So, I mean, I'm just going to cut.
But have you cut the cord?
No.
Okay.
I haven't.
And you haven't because?
Well, mostly sports. Mostly sports. So now if I can get, but CBS isn't part of this package. Mm-hmm. So that's a problem because they have a lot of football that you like to watch. They have a lot of NCAA basketball they like to watch. So it's really getting difficult here, I think, for the consumer. What I used to argue for people is, yeah, you're upset about the cable bill. Everybody's upset about their cable bill. But, man, it's convenient. Mm-hmm. It's one check, and you get everything. Now you're writing 6, 7, 8 checks, and are you getting a better product? Right. I don't know.
First of all, he's still writing checks. Let's just
that
log that
was just
and put that aside.
Figure of thought.
But then I also
wonder, a generational thing going on here.
But you were bringing up the idea that
I walk up and pay cash to the Comcast.
He just gives it right to them. That we're going to have like a bundle for streaming too. That eventually they'll have to bundle up to sort of sidestep exactly what you're just talking about.
Yep. It is a total disruption of the media marketplace. And who pays? I think the consumer does here. So certainly in terms of convenience. All right, now let's head down to Washington, D.C., World and National News with Amy Mars.
All right, thank you, Paul. President Biden blames Donald Trump for sinking a bipartisan immigration and Ukraine aid bill. Biden says Trump pressured members of his party to reject the deal to help him gain an advantage in the November election. We talked with Greg Vallier with AGF Investments about whether a Trump factor might increase the risk of a government shutdown.
Yeah, there's a risk if he, comes out and asserts that we must have a shutdown. That would influence a lot of people. I still think, though, the more likely outcome is once again, kick the can down the road. You have another extension well into the spring. There are many people in the House who wouldn't mind having just one extension after another through the fiscal year, which ends on September 30.
Greg Vallier with AGF Investments add that the Trump factor makes U.S. allies nervous. House Speaker Mike Johnson suffered a stunning defeat when Republicans narrowly failed to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Congressman Ken Buck of Colorado, one of the few Republicans who voted against removing Mayorkas from power, telling ABC he believes impeachment is a tool to be used rarely.
Impeachment is supposed to be a very, very last resort type of remedy. Not something that is used every Congress.
It took 3 GOP lawmakers to break from party leaders, arguing that policy differences with the secretary isn't a crime and do not meet this constitutional threshold for removal from office. San Diego County Sheriff's search teams are looking for a Marine Corps helicopter reported overdue early this morning. The Sheriff's Department was notified that the chopper was overdue for arrival at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar and was last seen in the area of Pine Valley. That's a mountainous region east of San Diego. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it. With Bloomberg News Now, I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
events, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Investors eyeing more corporate earnings reports ahead of a $42 billion sale of 10-year treasuries and another slate of Federal Reserve speakers. Oh, the S&P 500 could make history today. It's knocking on the door of 5,000. Meantime, Tony Dwyer of Canaccord Genuity advises investors, you know what? Buy the lows.
The Fed has said we're looking to lower rates. The timing of it's unclear, but that Fed pivot is an important thing. To me, what that makes me want to do is buy into that kind of weakness we saw on October 27th or any other low that we've had during that period.
And as far as earnings, Snap plunging by the most in a year after the Snapchat app owner reported lower than projected revenue over the holiday season. We have Snap shares right now 35% lower. CVS Health reporting better fourth quarter results than was expected by Wall Street. CVS shares, they're up 3.3%. And Uber reporting gross bookings beating analysts' estimates. Uber shares, they're up 1.2% right now. Overall, the S&P 500 is up 31 points. That's a rise of 0.6% at 49.85 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 149 points. And the S&P, the NASDAQ 100 up 152 points. That is a rise of 0.9%. And we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Alex.
Thank you. Thank you, John Tucker. Paul didn't even turn on his light. We are good to go. Listening to Bloomberg Intelligence, I'm Alex Steele alongside Paul Sweeney. We cover 2,000 companies, 130 industries worldwide with our amazing team of analysts from Bloomberg Intelligence. Let's get the perspective, though, on how to invest and where to put money when we're near 5,000, which really, let's be honest, means nothing with the S&P. People like round numbers, but I don't feel a lot of conviction heading into this. Phil Orlando is Chief Equity Strategist with Federated Hermes, and he joins us now. Phil, do you buy this rally here? Do you sell it? Do you sit tight? What do you do?
First of all, Alex, thank you very much for having me back on the program. Your previous guest made an interesting comment about buying dips, and that dip at 4,100 in late October was a great buying opportunity. We, like I'm sure a lot of folks, were all in at that time, but the market has now rallied by 22% from the end of October up here to, a week into February. The Magnificent Seven has really driven that rally. Last year, the Mag 7 was up 76%. The S&P was up 24%. The other 493 names were up 12%. So there's a valuation disparity that's been created here, and that's the point I'd like to make. We think that a lot of the froth in the market should spread out, and this rally should diversify, should broaden out. The areas of the market that were left for dead last year, domestic large cap value, domestic small cap growth, international. Those are the areas that we think have some room to run here. And we'd be very nervous with stocks up here, as you said, knocking on the door at 5,000. We're only 4% away from our full year target of 5,200. So something's got to give here.
That's right. All right. Are earnings going to give here? I mean, can we see an earnings growth driven market here? What are you seeing?
I think that's a great point, Paul, that as we look at the cumulative effect of what the Federal Reserve has done in terms of tightening monetary policy over the last, 2 years, right? They took interest rates from 0 to 5.5%. They've shrunk the balance sheet from $9 trillion down to $7.7 trillion. We think that the cumulative weight of that tightening is going to start to have an impact on the economy and corporate earnings. So we saw that the fourth quarter was slower than the third. We think that over the course of this year, the first 3 quarters of this year, GDP growth is going to be in that, 1.5% neighborhood. Not a recession. We're in the soft landing camp. But if GDP drops down from, let's say, 5% in last year's third quarter to 1% at its trough this year, should there be a commensurate decline in corporate earnings? Earnings growth is going to slow. And we think ultimately, given where valuation levels are, we could see some slowing in some stocks, particularly the growth and technology names that have just had a phenomenal run here over the last year or so.
Small cap trade, though, worked for a second last year, and then it didn't. What gives you the confidence that this time will be different?
The four most dangerous words in the English language for an investor. This time it's different. What we're focused on within the small cap growth space domestically is healthcare, with a real focus on biotechnology. As we talk to our biotech experts here, the pipeline, the drug pipeline for these companies has never been stronger. The valuations have never been cheaper. And if interest rates are in fact going to go down over the course of this year, which we believe they will, that should make the potential for M&A, merger and acquisition activity, more prominent. So given the valuation imbalance, we think small caps, again, specifically biotech, ought to work.
All right, Phil, how about just some sectors in general here? I mean, you mentioned the tech names, which have been a leader. A lot of folks feel like they need to continue to be a leader to move this market higher. Is there other places I need to be looking? Because unlike John Tucker, I did not own the Mag 7 last year.
Well, more broadly speaking, let's look over in the domestic large cap value area that I mentioned. There are two categories there, financials and energy, that we like a lot. Energy, crude prices are working higher. We've gone from the mid-60s to the mid-70s over the last couple of months based upon all of this instability, in the Middle East. The stocks really haven't participated. We could see crude prices, in our view, working back to $80, $90 a barrel, given all of this volatility on the underlying commodities. So energy should work. P's are low, dividend yields are very high. And then financial services. You go back a year ago when Silicon Valley Bank and that whole thing blew up, these stocks dropped 50%. Now, what we know now, or we think we know now, is that the problems were largely concentrated in a handful of companies that were poorly managed. And the rest of the banking industry, particularly the large cap names, are relatively in good shape, but they haven't come back to where they were or should have been. We think there's some catch up that will play out over the course of this year for them as well.
So, but we see New York Community Bank, and you could say that they bought some stuff from First Republic, and that's kind of why they're in that mess. So do you think...
That was going to be my answer.
Okay. So, but what about some of the regionals that aren't that company and that aren't like the JP Morgans? Like, do we need to be looking at those between like 200 and 250 billion, or is that going to be too risky?
Well, and I think we get into a stock picker's market environment where you've got to do your fundamental due diligence on these companies. And what do their balance sheet and income statements look like? Do they have the same sort of exposure to commercial real estate that Silicon Valley Bank or New York Community Bank did? Do they have the mismatch in assets and liabilities? Or have we just thrown out the baby with the bathwater? So that's got to be an individual decision that the analyst and the portfolio manager is going to make about whether an individual regional bank or money center has the same problems that some of the ones that have got taken out behind the woodshed, and rightly so, a year ago.
All right, very good. Phil Orlando, thank you so much for joining us. Phil Orlando, he's a chief equity market strategist, and he's head of the client portfolio group at Federated Hermes, joining us via Zoom from New York City. I kind of feel like I can't remember the last time we've been in a market of any length where tech wasn't driving the market. I don't know. It just seems like in the last 20 years.
But even if you take out tech for a second, if you look at a chart of the S&P equal weighted index versus small caps, for example, there's still been a huge outperformance for the S&P equal weighted. So like it isn't just tech, it's just definitely not small caps.
Yeah, exactly. And small caps, you're right. They worked for like a cup of coffee last year in that November, December run. Yep. We saw the Russell 2000 outperform the S&P. We saw the equal weighted S&P X SPW actually outperformed there for a couple of months. So that was good to see the breadth expanding there. A lot of technicians tell you that's kind of the sign of a healthier market when you have more breadth, so along with higher volumes as well. So we'll see how it plays out.
I feel like that's the question for today. Does the rally broaden? If it doesn't, they have to rethink the things.
Yep, very good. All right, S&P 500 up 0.6%. We're going to have more coming up. This is Bloomberg.
your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
And I'm John Tucker in the newsroom. We look at some of the company stories we are following. Let's start, since you guys were just talking about the tech industry, they're getting used to job cuts there. Starting in late 2022, technology companies began conducting rounds of layoffs that were deeper and broader than anything in recent memory. And so far this year, 32,000 tech workers have lost their jobs. This according to layoffs.fyi. This is a startup that's been tracking the metric. Alphabet, Amazon, Microsoft, Salesforce, Snap, and Zoom have all announced headcount reductions in recent weeks. And today, Bloomberg also reported Tesla staff are bracing for potential cuts there. And New York Community Bancorp reaching out to investors for capital to finance a large portfolio of residential mortgages as the pressures on the regional lender mount. The company also seeking third-party capital that would inject liquidity into a portfolio of residential mortgages. NYCB also exploring the sale of roughly $1 billion portfolio of recreational vehicle and marine loans. And then you have Ralph Lauren sales projected to grow 1.9%, though Bloomberg Intelligence saying the company may beat expectations given the third quarter U.S. transaction data. And the brand's popularity in China may boost things there. Still, higher marketing and store costs could keep Ralph Lauren's operating margin relatively flat. The results are due before the bell. A quick trivia question for the two of you before we run out of time. Ralph Lauren, as you know, changed his name to Ralph Lauren. From what?
John Smith.
No, it's Ralph Lifshitz. Yeah. I would say it's a pretty good change. Nothing wrong with Lifshitz, but Ralph Lauren, great brand. That's your company news.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
I'm Alex Steele here with Paul Sweeney, where we cover all the companies and industries you can think of in the world with the great minds from Bloomberg Intelligence. For now, though, we're going to go over to Amy Morris for world and national news.
Alex. President Biden blames Donald Trump for seeking a bipartisan immigration and Ukraine aid bill. Biden says Trump pressured members of his party to reject the deal to help him gain an advantage in the November election. Nikki Haley has another setback in the race for president. She came in a distant second in the Nevada primary, behind the option labeled none of these candidates. Greg Valliere of AGF Investments says Nevada's primary is really largely symbolic.
But it's not a good headline for her today. He's got until Super Tuesday, March 5th. If he wins a primary or two or three on March 5th, she's back in the picture. And once those primaries are over, I think Trump becomes the presumptive nominee by mid-March.
Nevada's Republican caucus is Thursday. Trump is on that ballot. Haley is not. Changes may be coming to the head of the Republican National Committee. Bloomberg News has learned Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel is in discussions with party leadership to step down by the end of this month. Sources say McDaniel, who has been in the national GOP top slot, has been facing pressure from the party's 2024 presidential frontrunner, Donald Trump. The Environmental Protection Agency is announcing a new rule, significantly reducing the level of air pollution known as particulate matter by updating the national air quality standards. Attorney Patrice Sims with the environmental law nonprofit Earth Justice says this could save lives. He says the rules seek to quantify some key metrics.
If you went outside, how much of this pollutant in the outside air is safe? And at what point does the level of pollutant in the outside air become unsafe?
Now, the current standard is for 12 micrograms of particulate matter per cubic meter of air. It's expected to be dropped to 9 micrograms. Trade groups have criticized air quality regulations in the past as a threat to U.S. competitiveness. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg, Paul and Alex.
Amy Morris, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Many reasons. I've been reading the Wall Street Journal since college. I love the Journal. Will always subscribe. One of my favorite parts is like when they have the real estate section and they put some of these monster houses that are for sale, and you get to see all over the world really. But they've got one here. America's most expensive home for sale hits the market for $295 million. It's down in Naples, Florida, and this guy John Donahue, who founded Federated, investment firm in Pittsburgh. We were just talking to Phil Orlando from Federated Hermes.
Mm-hmm.
It's still family owned, but he's the owner, and his wife had passed away. Now it's down to the next generation, and they've got 13. They had 13 children, John, Donna, Hugh, and they have 84 grandchildren. So they have like a compound down there in Naples, Florida, and now they're putting it on the biggest parcel, I guess, of this compound for $295 million. He bought it for $1 million in 1985.
Amazing. Apparently, he was flying above Naples, Florida in the 80s. And he's like, let's do that. I want to go there. And it has about, if I'm reading this correctly, because it kind of blows my mind, 1,650 feet of waterfront.
Yeah.
Highest price listing in the U.S. and would be the most expensive residential sale in the country, if it even gets close to that asking price.
Yep. So he paid, I guess, initially $1 million in 1985 for a roughly 4.3 acre parcel with nothing on it but a small fishing cottage surrounded by mangroves. And over the next decade, the Donahues amassed roughly 60 acres where they built a beachfront retreat for themselves and their burgeoning family of 11 children and 84 grandchildren. That's according to their son, Bill Donahue. And apparently, Bill is still he's the CEO of Federated, which is now Federated Hermes, $668 billion in assets under management. Wow. So just an extraordinary thing. And so we'll have to see. You know, we hear all about Florida, but what you've been hearing about over the last 3-4 years has been Miami. Yeah. Not so much on the West Coast. People seem to be wanting to go to Miami for obvious reasons. Yeah. Naples is a great place too. It's just a totally different vibe, of course.
It's a totally different vibe. And normally I would say, like, who needs all this space? But I don't know, with 84 grandchildren, you actually probably need all that space. My whole family is 5 people, so this would be, what would you do with all of that? Wow, okay, well, Paul will make his bid. We'll see how that goes.
Exactly. Check that out in the Wall Street Journal. S&P 500 is up 0.7%. We got coming up, Mr. Joe Matthew starts right now.
From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
Was that the night the wheels came off? Welcome to the fastest show in politics as the speaker swings twice and misses with failed votes on funding for Israel and on impeaching the Secretary of Homeland Security. We're going to have the latest on a chaotic 24 hours in Washington for you straight ahead, and a conversation with Congressman Al Green. The Democrat joins from his hospital bed today, which he left temporarily last night to cast what turned out to be the deciding vote on impeachment. He's going to be with us in just a moment. We'll have analysis as well. From our signature panel, Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis are with us for the hour, and we start, as always, with a look at Wall Street. Let's get to it. In New York, here's Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much, Joe Matthew, and here's what's going on. We got ourselves a Wednesday rally underway with the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ. We'll throw in the NASDAQ 100 index. Interestingly, though, Russell 2000 index of small cap shares is lower, down 0.3%, but the S&P right now up 35, up 0.7%, getting closer to S&P 5000. We've got the Dow up 159, up 0.4%. NASDAQ, the composite index, up 121, up by about 0.8%, while the NASDAQ 100 index also advancing now by 1%, up 179 points. A rally in tech mega caps leading stocks higher, with the S&P 500 approaching its 5,000 milestone. Bonds drifted before a record $42 billion sale of 10-year treasuries. So right now we've got the 10-year 4.10% with a 2-year 4.39%. Gold up $2 the ounce, now at $2,038, up 0.1%, and crude oil up 0.3%, $73.49 a barrel. Earnings news, a beat and a raise at Uber. Uber reported gross bookings that beat analyst estimates, showing strong global demand for rides and food delivery during the holiday period. Here's Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi, who spoke this morning with Bloomberg Radio.
Well, our trip growth was super strong, right? We grew trips 24% on a year-on-year basis on a base of 2.6 billion trips. So, as you get larger, it gets tougher to have that kind of growth.
And Uber shares, they are up now by 0.8%. Crosstown rival Lyft, also based in San Francisco, dropping by 4.3%. Big news coming up after the close of trading today when we hear from the Walt Disney Company. Disney now lower by 1.1%. Recapping, stocks higher for S&P up 36, up 7 tenths, 10-year, 4.10%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That, Joe Matthew, is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, we thank you. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Balance of Power here on Bloomberg Radio, on the satellite, and on YouTube. If you want to find us on YouTube, search Bloomberg Global News. The live stream is underway right now. The cameras are lit, and we'd love to meet you in the studio. As we have a little story time today, story time from Washington, another late night on Capitol Hill. And in this storybook, this is like a scene at a House of Cards. The headline on the terminal from our own Billy House: Congressman left hospital bed to head off Mayorkas impeachment. Imagine the optics here. This is the impeachment, of course, of Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Defense, said to be a done deal. Speaker Johnson speaking confidently throughout the day, even though apparently they didn't do a lot of whipping on this because it did not pass. And great drama in the process. As I read here on the terminal from Billy, Green, a Texas Democrat, had been recovering from emergency surgery, entered the House chamber in a wheelchair. Imagine the doors bursting open. Wearing scrubs. Just as it looked like Republican Speaker Johnson had barely enough votes to get the two articles of impeachment approved. That brought us to a tie. 215-215. Republicans then were forced to flip one vote so it would fail, allowing them to come back another day with a motion to reconsider, I should say. And the Speaker this morning said they will do this, and it will pass on the next round. We'll see if Al Green will be at that vote. He's with us right now by telephone from his hospital bed, the congressman from Texas, 9th District. Congressman Green, I hope you're feeling well, and I appreciate your joining us today. I guess you were well enough to leave your bed last night. Did you know at the time that you were going to be the deciding vote?
Well, hello, Mr. Matthew. Thank you for being so kind with your intro. I did not know. I quite candidly thought that the vote would pass, but I knew that I had to do my job. I knew that I wanted my vote to be counted because I know Secretary Mayorkas. I know the good things that he's done. I had an experience with him that I'll recount for you quickly. Had a young man, very young, who was a patient at Texas Children's Hospital. The hospital called my office and said, this young man has been picked up along the border with his mother. They were both undocumented. He came out of his own volition. And they placed him in a place where he had no support system. And this child was a dialysis patient, and he needed to get back. So we contacted the secretary's office, and he made it possible through what's called parole for this child's life to be spared. I sincerely believe this. When we arrived there was a team of doctors waiting. It was around 2 a.m. in the morning to take this child in. This parole has worked to save lives. It's not just an open gate for people to walk through. Secretary Mayorkas is a responsible person. He's not a ruthless, reckless, lawless demagogue. He's a responsible person who tries to treat people fairly. So thank you.
Well, certainly your Republican colleagues think he's a big part of the problem, while Democrats say he's simply carrying out the policies of Joe Biden. You've been working in Congress for a couple of minutes, Representative. What do you make of the current state of affairs here with this Republican conference? You got pretty used to Nancy Pelosi never bringing a bill to the floor, as they say, without knowing it would pass. What we saw last night was the definition of chaos, wasn't it?
Well, you're right. Eminently correct. Speaker Pelosi had her ducks in a row, as they say, all in order. I am amazed that it did not pass, to be quite candid. I thought that it would. So I can only say that this is a time of giving people, I suppose, the opportunity to understand that this business sometimes requires that you have to negotiate as opposed to require persons to capitulate. We've entered an era wherein dictation as opposed to negotiation is the seems. And this is not going to work. It's not going to work for Democrats, and it won't work for Republicans. We are going to have to work together on many of these issues, the big ones, to get them done. They have to be issues that we care about enough to make concessions on. An issue of paramount importance was in the Senate. My colleagues in the Senate, Republican colleagues, demanded certain things. There was literally capitulation. When they got what they wanted, they reneged on their own deal, the deal that they brought to the table. They have now decided it's not worth voting on. At some point, we have to realize that for some, not all, but for some people, the crisis at the border is a great political tool for the upcoming election. Unfortunate, but true.
I have to ask you, Congressman, what you see going forward here, because it does appear, according to the Speaker, there will be another round to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas. He says it will pass. We also know that the Senate's working up a standalone bill on Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan. It doesn't have the border, and I wonder if you see either, if not both of those, passing in the House.
My belief is that Mr. Mayorkas will be impeached. That's not my desire, and I will do all that I can to prevent it. But the numbers are there if they're all aligned properly. With reference to the bill that might come our way that deals with Taiwan, hopefully, and some other aid for the Palestinians, I would hope. Israel would be in there, of course, and of course Ukraine. Those are important issues. I'm very much concerned about all of them, but I will be very candid with you, dear sir. I have great concern for what's happening in Gaza. People are living almost in conditions unfit for animals. And we're not doing enough to circumvent the killing of innocent babies. You can, in the name of justice, create an injustice. It won't make it justice because you did it in the name of justice. So I'm concerned, and I'll make sure that we have meaningful help for those babies, those people who've had their schools demolished, infrastructure destroyed, homes obliterated. I want to see justice for them.
Did you vote for that Israel funding bill last evening, Congressman? Or did you not stay for that?
No, I got there so that I could cast one vote at the end and another vote at the beginning, and I left. But I voted against the bill because there's nothing in there for the Palestinians, the people who are suffering too. What Hamas did is deplorable, horrible, and I would never associate myself with them. I've signed on the resolutions denouncing Hamas, demanding the return of people who have been taken as captives. And I'm going to stand by that to the ends of the earth until my last breath. But I also know this. I can't condemn the killing of Israeli babies and then condone the killing of Palestinian babies. I can't do that. Now, there's some who do it. I'm not casting aspersions on them. I'm saying to you that as a matter of conscience, as a moral imperative, I've got to see something for those people because I voted for over $50 billion in aid to Israel since I've been in Congress. And I don't regret my votes, but here's what I do regret. I regret that the bombs that have been used, some of that artillery, those munitions, they were used because we provided funding to the Israelis, and they have taken that, and I don't think it was used judiciously. So I'm concerned about those babies.
Well, it does appear we're going to be providing quite a bit more. Congressman Al Green is joining us live from his hospital bed right now after making that surprise appearance last evening during the impeachment vote in the House. Congressman, I'm wondering, before you leave us, if your doctors okayed that, if they thought it was a good idea for you to leave? Because, you know, Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene are claiming that they were hiding you and that the Democrats somehow pulled a fast one at the last minute.
Thank you for addressing the issue. There was no trickery involved. I spoke to my physicians here when I saw on television, I'm lying here in the hospital bed, and I see that they're going to bring up this vote. So I talked to the staff here at the hospital. I talked to the physicians, my surgical team. I talked to the administration, and I had to negotiate with them. I had to sign a document explaining to me the possible harm that could befall me. I did it, and I called Speaker Jeffries. Yes, they were reluctant to do it, I will be candid, because they were concerned about me, and I love them for being concerned. But I had to cast this vote. This is my job. So I talked to Speaker Jeffries. I called him, and I explained to him that I was about to take an Uber. My staff was trying to get an Uber so that I could get to the Capitol. And he first of all said, Al, your health is the first thing that you have to consider. And after I convinced him that I was going to come, he said, well, look, we'll provide transportation. And that's the extent of his involvement. He did not demand that I come. He did not request that I come. He did not beseech. He didn't implore. He said, if you're coming, we'll give you transportation. I guess as a leader, he felt embarrassed that one of his members is coming from a hospital in an Uber to vote. So when I get there, I go into the attending physician's area, and they had a bed for me. So I went to bed. I was reclined. I was in bed, and they were checking my heart. They were checking my pulse rate, if you will, checking to make sure my blood pressure was in order. I had two nurses attending me while I was there, and I was waiting on the Mayorkas vote. And I'm sorry if they were thrown off because I didn't come up for another vote, but I didn't come for that vote. I didn't want to make a spectacle by going out there and sitting in a wheelchair in the midst of all of those people who were gathered and having it become more about my sitting there in a wheelchair than the purpose for my being there. So when I got there, they pushed me in. I took my card and I put my card in that terminal myself. There are people who are saying that I didn't really vote. I did. I put the card in the terminal and I voted. And after I voted, David Scott, who was seated right near me, said, Al, you just tied the vote. They can't impeach him. I had no idea when I put the card in that would happen. And after that was said to me, I was waiting on the next vote. I voted, which happened right afterward, not right, because they were looking for me or something, I'm told. So I put the card in, I voted the second time, and I left. But I was not pulled to the hill. I didn't have a leadership demanding that I come. In fact, I saw Speaker Pelosi. She will always be Speaker Pelosi to me. I saw Speaker Pelosi as I was going into the attending physician's office, Dr. Monahan. He arranged for me to have that. This was a part of my deal so that I could get to the Hill. So I was taken care of there with great professional hands. I was taken care of here. And it was all done to get me there to cast my vote. And here's why. Because I know this secretary. Baby at Texas Children's Hospital that needed help. The hospital got in touch with me and said this child had been taken across the border. He was not a citizen in an area with his mom where he had no support system. And they needed to have him back because he was a dialysis patient. I contacted the secretary. This process of parole is what got that child back and saved his life, in my opinion.
Yeah, I understand.
And for people to say that parole is being abused, this is not a gate to let the world in. It's a means by which people who genuinely need some help can get it. And
well, it's sure looking like the president's going to still have that authority unless something very important here changes, Congressman. We've got the rules that we have on the books. We only have a minute left, Al Green. Do you know when you're going to be released from the hospital, just quickly?
I do not know when I'll be released. I'm in great hands. These are professionals. And when they say I can go, I will leave.
Well, I appreciate your joining us from the hospital bed, my goodness, and I hope that your recovery continues successfully as Al Green is treated for emergency surgery, recovering, I should say, from emergency surgery, leaving his bed last night to cast what turned out to be the deciding vote in the at least first impeachment vote for Alejandro Mayorkas. The speaker says there will be another and it will pass. Al Green agreed with that. We're going to have a lot more live from Washington straight ahead with Jordan Fabian, Bloomberg White House correspondent, and our Washington editor Wendy Benjaminson with their take on a wild 24 hours in the city, what it means for both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, and great analysis from Rick and Jeannie later this hour. This is Bloomberg.
Headquarters. I'm Charlie Pellet. We are 11 points away from S&P 5000. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all advancing today. A rally in tech mega caps driving stocks higher. S&P approaching that 5,000 milestone. Bonds drifted before a record $42 billion sale of 10-year treasuries. Right now, the 10-year 4.10% with a 2-year 4.39%. S&P up 39 to 49.89, up 0.7%. 1%. Dow Industrials up 144, up by 0.4%. The Nasdaq Composite Index up 119 points for Nasdaq. That is a gain right now of just about 1%. Not all stocks are advancing today. Small cap shares are declining, with the Russell 2000 now down by 7 points, down by about 0.4%. Again, the 10-year 4.10%, with the 2-year 4.39%. Gold, little change now, up just about 80 cents the ounce to 2,036, up by less than 0.1%. Crude oil, West Texas Intermediate, up 0.4%, 73.61 a barrel. Snap Inc. shares plunging now by 35%. The Snapchat owner reported lower than projected revenue over the peak holiday season, disappointing investors just a week after much larger rival Meta Platforms posted its best sales growth in 2 years. Again, Snap shares down now by 35%. Disney, after the close of trading today, again recapping, S&P up 35, up 0.7%. Balance of power continues. Once again, here's your host, Joe Matthew.
All right, Charlie, we thank you and welcome, of course, to the Wednesday edition of Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Fascinating conversation, if you were just with us, with Congressman Al Green, who shocked the world last night when he was rolled literally into the House chamber in a wheelchair wearing scrubs, having left his hospital bed to set the tying vote for what ended up being a failed vote to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas. That was just the beginning. This was 2 swings, 2 misses, as Speaker Johnson then reached for the standalone Israel funding bill, and that failed too. And so a lot of new questions today, maybe not sounding so new, about his tenure and ability to lead this conference. And that's where we start with our reporter panel here in Washington. Jordan Fabian is with us, along with Wendy Benjaminson, covering both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. Wendy, the definition of chaos here, I guess. I'm guessing the speaker didn't plan it this way. I'm just trying to figure out the strategy. If they didn't know that they had the votes, why would they go through this exercise?
Well, that is the question that we just don't know. I mean, it could be that Speaker Johnson is inexperienced at House leadership. He wasn't part of House leadership when he got this gig. He was very low down in it. And but he's got people around him who know. He knew Steve Scalise was out. Mm-hmm. He knew that who would have been a yes vote. We all knew that at least 2 members of Congress who were Republicans were going to vote against it. So it didn't seem like it was all that difficult calculus there. Right. So, yeah, that's a big question. He's now getting hammered by both sides and really is not helping any Republican cause to look like the gang who can shoot straight.
Jordan, what's the Republican, or the White House reaction, I should say, to the Republican votes yesterday? Both of these were aimed at the White House in a way. The president threatened to veto the Israel bill, which failed. And, of course, this was the first attempt by Congress to impeach a cabinet secretary in about 150 years. Is Joe Biden smirking over there today? What's the feel?
Absolutely. There's definitely, they're looking at this and seeing a Republican Party in disarray. And they've said for a long time that this impeachment exercise was pointless and were haranguing the Republicans to work on the actual issues. And then Republicans challenged them on the Ukraine side to say, hey, we're not going to do this until we have an immigration package, probably thinking that Democrats would never meet those demands. They did, and then Republicans became the dog that caught the car, and they didn't know what to do. And so there's probably, and I'm picking up a sense of, just what the hell is going on over there from the White House. And frankly, Republicans had the upper hand on immigration for a long time. Yeah. This provides an opening for Joe Biden to take advantage of that politically.
Right, and we haven't even talked about the border package yet. That's coming up for a cloture vote while we're on the air, probably in our second hour. That's not expected to succeed either, Wendy. So it's kind of hard to tell who's winning.
No, that died yesterday, and why they're standing over the coffin voting to try to pass it seems kind of odd. Mm-hmm. And as Jordan said, the really weird thing about this is the whole plan of Trump telling House Republicans to be against this bill that they wanted, that they negotiated, that was going to be a big success for them, was that he needed the issue to campaign on. Well, now every Democrat in every state is going to campaign on the fact that, hey, we wanted to fix the border, and the Republicans killed it. So now they've just they've just turned themselves fully inside out.
You wonder how the president is going to deliver that message. We saw his, what I guess turned into a brief news conference yesterday, but his talk at the state dining room, Jordan, was pretty tough stuff. You wonder if he can break through. I mean, the White House has had trouble landing messaging for the last 3 years, hasn't it?
He's certainly going to try. If you listen closely to what he said every day between now and November, I'm going to be reminding the American people that Republicans are the ones who killed the deal when we tried to fix immigration, just as Wendy mentioned. And he said he's going to be out there reminding people of that. Sure. So you can be certain this is going to factor into their campaign messaging.
So let's move it forward then. It looks like Chuck Schumer, as soon as that cloture vote fails, comes back around, Wendy, with a Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan funding package that doesn't have the border deal.
Right.
Does this stand a chance, or is this a strange maneuver?
It's an odd one. It has a pretty good chance in the Senate, but then it goes right back
so
across
this is about putting people on the record. Is that the point?
Yes, this is about putting people on the record. And it could be that Republicans are sick of losing and want to, pass this bill. Some of them want Israel aid. Some of them want Ukraine aid. Everybody wants Taiwan aid. That seems to be the least controversial of this, which is odd in and of itself. So maybe they'll decide to pass it. Maybe they'll get the votes. But right now, no, Schumer is getting people on the record as saying no.
Wow.
To Ukraine and Israel.
Are we going to see the president lean into this, Jordan, in your remaining moment with us here? Does he make a visit to Capitol Hill, try to push this thing over the line the way we saw with things like infrastructure or the IRA?
If it has a real chance of passage, I think he would, but I think you're going to more likely see him on the campaign trail talking about this than on Capitol Hill.
He wants to use it too.
Yeah, of course. and why wouldn't he? I mean, they have, I will say for the White House, they have made good faith efforts to try and get this across the finish line. Yeah. They compromised on immigration in a way that really angered the immigration rights activists, Hispanic groups, and lawmakers. That poses risks for them heading into the election, and Republicans wouldn't even meet them an inch. So he does have a story to tell there. The question is, can he make it break through?
Jordan Fabian, Bloomberg White House correspondent, thanks for being so patient and for weighing in here, Jordan, as we spend a little more time with Wendy Benjaminson following an interesting night, but what could be a more interesting day. Wendy, I'm not sure how you see this all playing out in terms of the votes in the Senate, but it sounds to me like cloture is going to fail.
Right.
And a standalone bill funding Ukraine and Israel might well pass. We heard today from Speaker Johnson. Pass the Senate.
Yes.
Mike Johnson said in that briefing this morning that he was going to entertain what was sent to him. He said, let's wait to see what the Senate sends over. Is that just what he has to say? Or he might entertain bringing this to the floor?
He might entertain bringing it to the floor. What he also might do is do some whipping, as they call it on Capitol Hill, which means counting the votes to make sure that you go to a vote knowing what you're supposed to do. There is a long tradition of speakers, House speakers, never bringing a bill to the floor unless they know it's going to go their way, whether that's up or down. And then they would just not bring it to a vote. And there's funny commentary on social media today about maybe counting votes as girl math, which is a hearkening back to Nancy Pelosi, who really had a very, very firm grasp, whether you agreed with her or not. She would never have put a bill on the floor without knowing the outcome.
This is a tough time for the leadership all the way around, isn't it?
Yes. And if they decide to do the motion to vacate again, then we're going to get somebody with even less experience.
Well, that's likely true, because God, who in the world with experience would ever try this, right?
Right. George Santos.
Well, hey, listen. Actually, we have an election to cover there coming up next week. What happens to the rest of the leadership team? Mike Johnson's taken a lot of flack. But what about the whip? What about the majority leader?
Right.
Who's controlling the caucus, or who's supposed to be other than the speaker?
Right. I mean, if I were Mike Johnson, those are the people I would be speaking to today. The whip is the guy who's supposed to count the votes and lean on the members that aren't going your way and make sure everything's in place. And the majority leader is supposed to lead the majority. That something went wrong yesterday, and that didn't happen. And I think there's a Trump is the specter over all of this, Donald Trump, because some people are afraid of crossing him, and some people want to cross him, and some people, just vote their conscience, I guess. There might be a few of those left. It's just a mess.
It's interesting. Every Republican lawmaker we talked to yesterday vehemently denied that prospect that Donald Trump's was having an impact on anything going on right now in the House, but nobody could tell us specifically what it was in the border bill that they didn't like.
Right.
Other than, I guess, a sort of general sense of, it being toothless, that's written in a way where it's not enforceable. That seemed to be a general theme.
Right.
But boy, we're having a hard time getting answers on this.
Right. Well, no one wants to say Donald Trump made me do it.
Yeah.
No one is going to say that out loud. Although, if we look at the chain of events, this was their bill. This was their idea. James Lankford, a very well-respected senator, put a lot on the line to get this passed with Democrats. And then Donald Trump says he doesn't like it. And all of a sudden, everybody does a 180 and says they don't like it and refuse to pass it. So, does 2 + 2 equal 4?
This a couple of years ago, this probably would have been a beautiful kumbaya moment where something got done, where Democrats saw the light, Republicans got what they've been asking for
And as
years.
you and I talked about yesterday a little bit, and no one's perfectly happy because that's what happens in divided government. Everyone's a little unhappy.
What did you say? Anyone who's
I've
been
been married for more than a week, yes, knows how that works.
Oh, God.
You and
no
I both
idea
have.
what you mean by that. Jim Lankford, you mentioned his name, might vote no today. Are you kidding me? On cloture? Let's find out together.
That's pretty
That
amazing.
should say a
That'll be
lot,
fun
right?
to watch.
Wendy Benjaminson here in our Washington Bureau at Bloomberg. Thank you, Wendy. Great for the analysis from Wendy and Jordan Fabian as we update things now. World and national news. Nancy Lyons has that from the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington. Hi, Nancy.
Hey, Joe. Secretary of State Antony Blinken continues his Mideast trip, and he's now in Israel. He's working to advance a framework for a possible Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal following Hamas's official response that included demands that Israel doesn't like.
We're looking at it intensely, as is, I know, the government of Israel. And there's a lot of work to be done, but we are very much focused on doing that work and hopefully being able to resume the release of hostages that was interrupted so many months ago.
Blinken has already held a lengthy meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. Well, last night, as you've been hearing here on Bloomberg, the House failed to have the votes to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. House Speaker Mike Johnson spoke with reporters earlier today.
Yeah, on impeachment, last night was a setback, but democracy is messy. We live in a time of divided government. We have a razor-thin margin here, and every vote counts. Sometimes when you're counting votes and people show up when they're not expected to be in the building, it changes the equation. But listen, we have a duty and a responsibility to take care of this issue. We have to hold the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security accountable.
Speaker Johnson says they will impeach Secretary Mayorkas on the next go-around. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it on Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nancy Lyons.
Bloomberg World Headquarters. I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks continue to push higher with the S&P 500 index now at 4984, 16 points away from S&P 5000. Right now we're looking at a gain of 0.6%. The Dow up 131, higher by 0.3%. And the Nasdaq Composite Index up now by 92. That is a gain of 0.6%. A rally in tech megacaps driving stocks higher as the S&P 500 approaches its 5,000 milestone. 10-year yield at 4.10% with a 2-year that's yielding 4.39%. Spot gold flat on the day, $20.36 the ounce. Bitcoin up 1.1%, 43,650 right now on Bitcoin. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, 73.70 for a barrel of WTI. The Commerce Department is out with its tally of 2023 international trade, and with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
We're looking at the narrowest annual trade gap in goods and services in 14 years. Efforts to hold business inventories in check are restraining import traffic. Net exports, meantime, help prop up economic growth as the post-pandemic supply chain continues to untangle. In other U.S. economic news, weekly mortgage rates rebounded. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
New York Community Bancorp sought to reassure investors that its financial position is strong after shares touched a 27-year low yesterday. The bank said deposits have increased since the end of last year and liquidity remains, quote, ample. Shares of New York Community Bank down now by another 6%. After the close of trading today, we will be hearing from the Walt Disney Company. Disney ahead of earnings, down now by 0.9%. Recapping, S&P up 28, up 0.6%. S&P right now at 49.83. I'm Charlie Pellet. That Joe Matthew is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, we thank you. Thanks for being with us on the fastest show in politics, Bloomberg's Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, D.C. I was mentioning the movie Brewster's Millions the other day. Clearly, I need you to watch this. The great Richard Pryor, in which, remember, he has to spend $30 million in a certain period of time to get an even greater fortune. One of the things he did in that movie was run for mayor of New York as a way to waste money. And he started a none of the above campaign. It's a great populist movement. Of course, you know, everybody fell in love with him in the process. But none of the above actually was on the ballot last night in Nevada. It actually said none of these candidates. None of these candidates was the actual language on the ballot. And none of these candidates won. It's just like the movie. The problem is Nikki Haley was also on that ballot. In a post on Truth Social last night, Donald Trump wrote, "Bad night for Nikki Haley, losing by almost 30 points in Nevada to none of these candidates. Watch, she'll soon claim victory." Actually, he will, because he's in the caucus tomorrow in Nevada. That's the one that brings the delegates, and he's on that ballot. It was a confusing mess, and how we got here is kind of a long story. But this is not a good look for Nikki Haley as she heads to South Carolina. So let's assemble our panel and get things going today with Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, Bloomberg Politics contributors. Rick, I don't know if you ever envisioned running a none of the above campaign, but is this as embarrassing as it seems on the surface?
Yeah, I don't quite understand what the thinking was behind it. She doesn't get any delegates. The only thing that matters is delegates. And I always assumed that her campaign strategy was just accumulate delegates. So why take time away from a state where there are a lot of delegates at stake to go to one where there are only 26 delegates at stake, and none of them were on the ballot yesterday? So waste of time, waste of money, and waste of the candidate's strategy. I mean, at best, you can assume she thought she was going to do well and could say she won, but I mean, nobody's going to believe that. So who does she think she's talking to?
Jeannie, somebody just forwarded me a tweet or an X, or whatever, from a guy named Max. Nikki Haley was absolutely correct, it reads. Nothing could stop her. And it did. Is this the end?
I have to say that's very good on Max's part. I like it a lot. I don't think it's the end. I think she's going to compete in South Carolina. But, when is the last time we've seen somebody lose in their home state and go on to get the nomination? So it's a tough night in Nevada. It's going to be tougher, I think, in South Carolina. She says she's going to plow through. But boy, this is getting really, really tough. And it just shows us once again, as if we didn't have enough evidence yesterday with everything going on in Congress, how much Donald Trump owns this party. I mean, he is the one with this Nevada Republican Party in his grips who pushed them to keep the caucus where they give the delegates despite a state law saying a primary. And these poor voters in Nevada, imagine having both a primary and a caucus. The confusion was great. And of course, it was a bad night for Nikki Haley. She's saying it was rigged. It was rigged. But of course, you know, how much can you keep losing and claim to win?
A statement from Nikki Haley's spokesperson reads, "We're trying too hard here sometimes." Quote, "Even Donald Trump knows that when you play the penny slots, the House wins. We didn't bother to play a game rigged for Trump," referring to the caucus later this week. "We're full steam ahead in South Carolina and beyond." The beyond is the real question right now. As we now consider a change at the top of the RNC, Rick Davis, it's been circulating these past couple of days, but we need to talk about it. Ronna McDaniel is planning to step down reportedly as chair of the RNC following the South Carolina primary. She was summoned to Mar-a-Lago, met with Donald Trump, and he delivered that news to her. You ever heard of something like that happening midstream, mid-campaign cycle?
Yeah, you hear about these kinds of things trying to happen, but usually they make it through the election cycle. And but look, Ronna McDaniel has really distinguished herself since becoming RNC chief. She has overseen the largest string of losses for our party in I think modern political history. So she doesn't have a whole lot that she can fall back on. And even Trump saying on Fox this morning, she was great when she won Michigan for me. She was okay as chairman, but now I got an election. She's got to go. Everybody, even Trump, agrees that they've got to have somebody at the top of that RNC that actually knows something about campaigns. However, seeing the candidates lining up to do that, to become the next chairman, you got to wonder who's going to be any better than her.
Matt Whatley, North Carolina Republican Party chair, is the expected name here to replace her, referred to Rick this morning in the tip sheets as a stop the steal guy.
Yeah, he I guess doesn't think elections have consequences, so you can lose but still win. I don't think that's exactly what you're looking for, and he has a very limited amount of campaign experience. So kind of typical with Donald Trump, where he's got more lawyers than he has campaign operatives. I guess he wants the same thing over at the RNC. I suspect there may be a contest there. A lot of the RNC isn't happy with the leadership they've had and aren't sure Whatley's one of them that can actually win an election for them. And frankly, at least there's some heartbeat that this RNC wants to actually try to win.
All the while, Jeannie, Joe Biden is in New York City. I don't know if you're going to bump into him later. But he's got a couple of campaign receptions, quietly flying up to New York. Come on back down to the White House to sleep in his own bed tonight. We already talked about the amount of cash that he's sitting on here. Is that the mission for him? While Donald Trump figures things out of the RNC, Nikki Haley figures out her future, raise as much money as you can right now.
That's right. The reality is one of the main reasons that Ronna McDaniel is being pushed out is, of course, they raised the least amount of money, the RNC, in 2023 in the past decade. It was only $87 million, and you compare that to almost 120 with the DNC. So they've got a lot of ground to make up. She's not the one, by the way, who lost them at seats in 2022 and 2023. That was Donald Trump, but she happens to be sitting on top of it. So she'll take the fall. And of course, Joe Biden will keep raising money. And the DNC is looking very good. And of course, we have to say, he also won in Nevada handily last night. And so he is on a very good stretch. And it's been a very good moment for him in this way as he tries to get enough money to combat Donald Trump's free media. That's sure to come fast in the next few months.
I keep hearing that too, that Joe Biden won by an overwhelming amount in Nevada. That was supposed to happen, right? My goodness, that would be a story if he had not. We'll have more with our panel, Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, straight ahead. Kaylee Lyons will join coming up in just about 10 minutes for hour two, a conversation with former Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman, who's watching all of this transpire from his perch in Virginia. It's coming up on Bloomberg.
your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Walt Disney Company reports earnings after the close of trading today. Top of mind for investors is what clarity the company can offer when its streaming business will deliver profits. Disney shares ahead of earnings, down now by 1.1%. And one of the questions coming out of the arrangement with Disney's ESPN, Fox, and Warner Brothers announcing that they're joining forces to launch a sports-focused streaming service is the longer-term impact on sports rights. And that question this morning from Michael Nathanson, a senior analyst with MoffettNathanson.
We think we've hit a top in sports rights values, and this is just going to accelerate that change, right? You saw a couple weeks ago that the wrestling rights, WWE rights, left Fox to Netflix in a global deal. And that was a good deal for Netflix. So that was a sign of the change that was going to come.
And you can hear more of that conversation on the Surveillance podcast. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts. The Boston Red Sox will be the focus of a pair of new Netflix shows. The streaming service will follow the team through the 2024 season and present a documentary series in 2025. Netflix shares, they're up by 1.6%. Ford is working on inexpensive small electric vehicles to stem its electric vehicle losses and take on Tesla as well as Chinese automakers. CEO Jim Farley revealed the plans to analysts after the automaker announced adjusted EPS of 29 cents a share, more than double the 13 cents that analysts had expected on average. Fourth quarter revenue of $46 billion surpassed the $40.3 billion that analysts were expecting. Ford shares right now, they're up by 3.9%. And those are our top company stories at this hour, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Balance of Power with Joe Matthew on Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks for joining us live from Washington as we try to rationalize what we've learned here over the past 24 hours and what might transpire in the next couple of hours here. Some important votes in the Senate. If you're playing along in your home game following the failed Israeli funding bill last night in the House, the failed impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas, it's the Senate's turn. Prepare for more failure. This is what we're hearing, at least. The big border deal, the supplemental request for Ukraine, Taiwan, Israel, border deal that everyone hates. That's going to get a cloture vote. That's not the vote. That's the procedural vote that would allow it to move beyond filibuster. You need 60 for that. It does not look like they have it. That's coming up within moments here. Then what happens after that is going to be interesting. Indeed, if that does fail, Chuck Schumer is promising to take another swing with essentially the same bill, remove the border. So funding our allies in Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan. And it's kind of unclear what might happen. That may well pass the Senate. Could it pass the House? Let's assemble the panel. We'll have a lot more time on this with Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano in our second hour, but I haven't even brought this up yet. The White House, as I see a headline crossing the terminal, Rick, says it supports new Senate Ukraine bill without border. Is that the way this is going to end?
Well, that's the way it's going to end in the Senate, I suspect. I mean, they've still got to get 60 votes for that provision, but they got a better chance of doing that than obviously the exercise they're going through today on just wiping the slate clean on the border, bill. So the question then is going to be like, how do you find a path?
Is Plan B going to work here? Does Ukraine get the money after all that time and all that debate and with no border deal attached?
It should, absolutely. And, I think there may be the 10 votes they need to push this skinny bill through once he removes immigration. I think the big question is going to be in the House. I